Board of Trustees of the Village of Sleepy Hollow. I would like to ask for a motion to go into special session to consider one resolution. Is there and there's a second, moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? Okay, this is special session of the board, and it is called to consider one resolution. If I could have somebody read the resolution, please.
I'll take it. Resolution of the Mayor and the Board of Trustees confirming Mayor's appointment. Be it resolved, the Board of Trustees of the Village of Sleepy Hollow approve the Mayor's appointment of Christopher E. Gross as Superintendent of Public Works effective Monday, August 2nd, 2021, with the following terms and conditions of employment. 1. Wages. Christopher E. Gross, base salary will be $155,000 prorated for any partial year of service. Work hours. 40 hours per week with the prior approval of Village Administrator. Christopher E. Gross may flex his work hours within his defined work week. Vacation. Christopher E. Gross will receive 20 vacation days each year, prorated for any partial years of service. Village vehicle. Christopher E. Gross will be provided with a village vehicle only to be used for work-related travel and work-related emergencies in accordance with the village's personnel manual. All other terms and conditions of employment will be as per the village's then current personnel manual and other policies and procedures, unless and until subsequently altered by village board resolution. Be it further resolved that said appointment is provisional and subject to the approval by the Westchester County Department of Human Resources. So moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? The resolution is approved. Can I get a motion to end our special session?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And our special session is done. Mr. Gross, welcome to Sleepy Hollow.
Thank you very much, everybody, and I appreciate the opportunity.
All right.
Well,
Great.
glad it's official. Looking forward to
Likewise.
you coming on.
Very much likewise. Thank you.
Good, good.
Thank you very much.
I wish it was the day after tomorrow, but
Yeah, I know, it can't be soon enough. Thank you again.
Sorry,
Well done.
yeah.
I'll do it Friday. Yes, for tonight?
See you again.
Okay.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
Thank you very much.
You
All right.
got it.
Nice to see you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Congratulations.
Thank you. All right. Chris, welcome aboard. Thank you very much. All right.
Well, now you have to stay for the entire meeting. Only short.
normally what people do is they go, yeah, sure.
No, I'm gonna do it.
It used to be you pretend you're going out to have a cigarette, and then you just never come back. But nobody smokes anymore, so anyway, look forward to this. We're all quite excited.
Likewise. Thank you very much.
All right,
All right.
be well.
Have a good night. Nice to meet you. Mr. Gross. John, nice meeting you. Thanks. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.
Aye.
Okay, our first discussion item is regarding Sykes Park playground equipment. I had a quick call, or not a quick call, I had a call, a discussion, conversation with Matt Arone. He said he's meeting with the company that did the Margata Courts playground for us this Thursday. And so what I'd like to do is, I think it would be more fruitful if we see what they come back with, and we have a discussion either under new business at our next meeting, I believe is a board meeting on the 29th. We can do that, or in a work session. So it's just important to note that this is being addressed, and he had tried to get them to come in earlier, but it just couldn't work out with their schedule.
That meeting is to look at replacement, correct?
Replacement or repair, all of the above.
I think it's replacement at this upcoming meeting?
Well, the
Has he got a
playground is
repair?
fairly old.
Yeah.
I think it was, I want to say 2000, so it's 20 years old. I think it could be replaced.
Yeah.
But I think that's the likely outcome. I
Yeah,
wanna say.
well, so I guess the issue that I'm raising is like, it's an immediate safety hazard. Like right now, it's a safety hazard. Tripping, cutting, tetanus,
Then
all
we,
sorts of things.
then we close the playground.
I would encourage that we do that until we can get it repaired, unfortunately. I mean, I know it's like peak season and it's one of our most highly used playgrounds, which is really unfortunate. I was actually where was I? In Tuckahoe, and they had a playground in the exact same condition and theirs was closed.
Could we just cordon off the pieces that are a little bit broken?
It's like the whole playground.
I mean, it's not gonna, this is gonna be a sore point, closing a playground right as school ends. I don't know.
Go look at it.
Oh, you saw the
Yeah.
photos?
I mean, it's rough.
Because it's gonna be closed all summer.
Not if we get it repaired.
No, if we
That- that
decide
can be
that
repaired next week.
if it needs to be replaced, then yeah, it's closed until order, decide on what equipment to bring in and all the rest of it.
Unless
can't
they
we-
could do a temporary repair while we wait for a new playground to
So
come
the
in, that's
repairs-
also a possibility.
Yeah, the repair is $12,000 and they can do it.
Just a repair is 12,000.
No.
Oh, close that sucker.
So,
Wait, we're gonna close it, repair it, and then replace it?
No, close it
No,
and get a new
it's-
one.
let's find out what happens with their visit with Mr. Arone
Yeah.
on Thursday, okay?
Yeah, I mean, sharp edges, like steel.
And Mr.
sharp.
Gia- Wouldn't want to try to
Giaccio,
get her.
in the meantime, could you instruct Mr. Arone or police chief or whoever, or Mr. Gross, to
Close it.
close it, okay?
Got it.
Good? Okay. Trustee Rodriguez brought up an interesting idea in our last meeting and regarding Elm Street and the potential for solar, generating energy through solar panels above the Elm Street lot. And so kick it off.
Sure. So I met with a company called Egoje, and they are
Does
actually.
anybody have a Phillips head?
It's so annoying.
I know.
I don't know. Does this? Let me just like stand up there. I met
We
with
don't
a
have one.
Sit around.
Paul is actually printing this right now because I think we should all have a copy of it to walk through. But I met with a company called.
All right, let's do this then.
Yeah.
We can,
Let's move on to our next discussion item. and we'll
She'll
come
print
back.
it. Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
So our next discussion item is on the top of Cortlandt Street or on the side of Beekman, depending on where you're standing. There's an intersection that we have, that intersection is one that we've talked about for several years now, about creating a small parklet or a plaza or something. And that leads us into this discussion. And there's a proposal, again, from Trustee Rodriguez to take a look at it and see, we could close it as a temporary seasonal thing and see how it works.
Yeah. So we wouldn't lose parking. We could swing the parking spaces over, just restripe. Actually, what's interesting is that intersection was just repaved, so it needs restriping. I think we could come up with a striping plan to put the crosswalk back in across Beekman and maybe at a better location than where it currently is. And with planters and maybe some concrete blocks, we could just do a temporary seasonal closure of that turning lane onto Beekman. It's the western turning lane. You and I, Ken and I met with the fire chief, and he actually drove a rig and made a left turn from Cortlandt onto Beekman, and it took that turn in strides. No real geometry issues with making lefts or rights from the eastern side of Cortland onto Beekman. And yeah, I mean, we think it would make a pretty nice small picnic area. Folks could take food out from the taco place or from, get pizza from Beekman Ale House and sit outside. Maybe we can provide a couple picnic tables.
Yeah, that was my only concern. I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time, and it's thinking about, okay, let's get a design, and it's like, and this is like, well, why don't we just stick some stuff out there and see if it works?
See how it goes.
We don't have to do anything permanent right away. We can just see how, and then, it's not that big of a deal if we want to change it back, because we wouldn't have really done anything. And the only real concern I had was what about the fire truck?
Right.
So if somebody's coming up Cortland and has to make that turn, and it was, Chief Corzelius just came up and he looked both ways before he turned, but he just came up and it was plenty of space to make it. So
It should be cool.
and then, as you pointed out, the ladder truck should never be making that turn anyway, because it would be coming straight down Beekman. And
Right.
so that's, I was like, cool. So I'd love to do this.
So what would be the next steps?
Next step is to put out some barriers, restripe where the parking spaces are. If you picture the area, that little triangle there, the lane on both sides, there's two parking spaces here. If you have the triangle here and you block out the lane, the two spaces actually
Yeah.
fit on the street there, so we don't lose any parking at all. We have it essentially in the same spot that it spots where it was. So it's makes more sense to take some of the, DPW has some existing larger flower pods that are, pretty big. So it would make it more substantial than a bollard and not as ugly as a Jersey barrier. But there's an opportunity to put something in there, kind of make it look nice, do something on the other side, and start from there. So,
Do we need to notice the public at all about this, something in their mailboxes or a sketch of what we're planning or anything like that?
we would, I think it's appropriate to notify people in the immediate neighborhood who use the street, hey, this is what we're gonna do, and go from there. I think the fact that people can make the turn, and I think that since we're not losing any parking spaces, it should make it a lot easier for folks.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's gonna oppose it. I just think it's fair to warn them that it's about to happen.
Yeah.
And I think we could maybe, I don't know if we want to discuss it now, but, planters and what kind of street furniture you want to do. Because I think it could be really nice, actually. Yeah, it could really dress up that intersection. And then I think the only other thing is whether or not that eastbound lane gets a stop sign. So we don't currently have one, and that's sort of a safety hazard.
You mean eastbound on Beekman?
Beekman eastbound before
Right at
hitting
the
that
intersection.
intersection, there is no
So
stop
two
sign.
stop signs in a row right there? What you're suggesting?
Teresa, not Teresa, sorry, St. Teresa's Church
Mhm.
is the.
Would be three in a row.
Yeah, it would go St. Teresa's Church, Cortland, Pecanic.
I
If
think,
it's
I think
necessary.
one of the things we have to do to inform this conversation is we need to all revisit the traffic mitigation measures that are part of the Edge on Hudson approval. Because one of those is a turn lane onto Botanico. So which would require taking out a bunch of spaces right in that area. So we should look at that and see what is part of the, what are in those requirements.
Yeah.
I think it also leads into a larger discussion about some of the other streets in the area, about which way they go, one way, where they are one way, where they're still two-way. A few years ago, we turned Howard Street into a one-way street. And if you drive down it now, or out on Howard now, you find it hard to believe it was ever a two-way street. So, you know, that one was kind of easy to do. It made a lot of sense, and including to the folks in the neighborhood who were asking that we do something there. So
Yeah,
before we do a whole lot more, we should look at what were the mitigation measures that were there, so we know what those studies say and what was proposed or required, and look at whether or not we need any further studies on some of the other areas as part of it, to make our downtown safer.
Closing this dogleg, we're calling it, is going to improve the condition as it is. It is sort of a safety hazard as it is. But the left turn and the right turn onto Beekman from Portland is a hazard because you do have speeding cars that aren't stopping for that intersection.
I would just imagine that by doing this, it will back up traffic a little bit at that stop sign at peak hours, because people are not you have people making left and right from one lane as opposed to two.
Yeah, it actually widens on existing Cortland. It widens almost to 2 lanes. So there's almost like a left turning lane and a right turning lane. And cars routinely line up right next to each other. There's enough room for the bus to pull over and pick people up, people to pass, which is pretty interesting that it's that wide. I didn't realize it was that wide until we walked it a couple weeks ago. So I don't know that queuing is going to be so much of an issue. We have really low traffic counts on Cortland to Beekman.
It depends on what time of day you go. I've gotten stuck.
Yeah, I mean, even at peak.
Especially when people are double parked on Beekman and people can't get around them.
Yeah, the double
Chief?
parking.
Double parked on Beekman while there's a bus.
While
at
there's
the
a bus.
stop.
Yeah.
People parked at the bus stop.
Yeah.
Cars that are intending to go further down Beekman will just start to turn onto Pie Street, which is fine.
Yeah.
Good point. Mr. Giacchio, could you pull the traffic mitigation stuff from, and send just that portion to the board members? I think the FEIS is still on the website, but somewhere lurking in those 1,800 plus pages is the traffic mitigation stuff. So it would be helpful.
Would you ship the parking meters out as well?
We have to look at it. One of the things is I want to make sure the signage, like those reflectors at night, so people know to stay to the right.
Yeah.
As far as the meters go, we didn't, that's more of a permanent rule.
Yeah.
Well,
We'll have to look at
it's a good point, though, if we don't put the meters out there, that would be permanent parking for somebody.
That's true too.
Maybe.
Have to figure it out.
Yeah, maybe it's
Yeah,
just
check
a
it
drill a
out.
hole in the street situation. Yeah. Cool.
Okay? All right, that'll be.
How much does a parking meter take in? Do we know?
Depends where, I guess, what location it is. Have to ask the chief exactly.
I think it's more making sure that somebody isn't hog the site.
Yeah. I know. I wouldn't let that stand in the way of getting it done, though.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting, and the fire chief brought this up. Chief Corzilius brought up the fact that there's a lot of illegal parking in fire zones and at the bus stop. So I wonder if there was a temporary, 15-minute spot that didn't have a parking meter, if that would alleviate some of the issues. Because people run into the deli all the time, and they're always either parked in the crosswalk, fire zone, bus stop. It's kind of a free for all because of the deli. Honestly, people are running into the deli.
Was it 15-minute, and we did that for the,
There's also one in front of Coco's as well.
yeah, we did that for the same reason. He wasn't going to have, so we can
So maybe that's a way around moving the meter.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just like a short sort of spot.
Okay, we've got the presentation being distributed now, so we'll resume our discussion on solar.
All right.
Elm Street.
Cool. So Egoje is the company that put this proposal together. If you jump to the third page, actually, you could see fairly large system that's on the roof of the DPW.
Talk really slow for a moment while he's getting into that too.
Okay. Yeah, flip to page 3, and pretty large solar system at the Croton DPW, which is pretty cool.
Thank you, ma'am.
So this system's on page 3. That's a 300 kW system, and you know, typical house solar that you see is like 5 or 6 kW. So that's a pretty big system that this company installed.
Which page?
Page 3 is showing the Croton.
So
Yep.
okay, just was looking at the wrong one. All right.
All right. So
Wow, that's pretty massive.
it's pretty nice, right?
I said massive.
Pretty massive. Yes.
Well, it looks, because it's sitting on top of a building.
Yeah.
That looks, yeah.
But you know, we're gonna have a new DPW too, so think
Yeah.
about that. So next page, it says case study, Village of Croton on Hudson. I'm just gonna skip this page, and then it says our offer. You could skip that page. Interconnection review at the top of the page. Basically here they're saying that the distribution or the wires that are on the street, Con Edison's wires, have enough capacity to host a pretty large size solar system here. It makes sense because, you know, there's a lot of load, right? We're in like a dense urban area, so there's a lot of electric load, meaning that the wires are big enough to host power being injected into the distribution network. So if you jump to the next page, they're showing preliminary canopy site plan 1. This is like option 1. At left, they're showing what the canopy looks like. There's an aisle canopy and a perimeter canopy. In this first option, they're only showing 2 aisle canopies, which would cover, it would span basically like 2 lanes of parking. So under each canopy, you've got 2 spots that are like nose to nose. And the drive lanes are open. There's no parking over the drive lanes, which I think is critical. Like if you do want to get a rig in there, like a fire rig, you don't want anything overhead.
Jared, do they have like little heaters in them or something for the winter? Yeah. Like, I was just imagining those things would weigh a ton of. Like,
With the
snow
snow load?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, they're designed to carry a snow load. Because they're dark colored
Yeah.
and they're glass, the snow slides off.
Should slide on.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're tilted.
Well, you can go behind the car. Yeah.
Well, it's actually pretty,
But then it gets flat.
it's pretty nice for the cars that are parked there because the dig out
It'll
situation.
keep the spots clear.
Yeah.
It could
You're
create,
gonna have to dig out though.
like
Yeah.
once a winter, somebody's gonna find a pile of snow behind their car when they weren't expecting it.
Yeah. But this past winter
Those
was
things can handle
epic.
that much snow.
The digging out situation in this parking lot this past winter was like
It's all right.
unbelievable. Yeah. So next page this is just showing option 2, which has 2 of the aisle canopies and 1 perimeter. The perimeter canopy on the right is covering like 1 lane parking effectively. And what this does is just, it boosts the amount of generation that can be hosted on the site. You flip the page, this one is going further and just adding it on top of every parking lane, perimeter and aisle options. And now if you flip to the next page, this is a summary of the site lease. that they're offering. And so this is a situation where if we chose to pursue this, we would lease the lot to the solar company, so that they would own the system, generate their power, sell their power to Con Edison, and then pay us a lease for the permission to, operate this solar plant on the parking lot. Obviously, these three different options, the ones that have the higher generation yield more lease because they can afford to pay a higher lease. And the annual lease payment on option 3, which has the most amount of generation, is, $37,700 per year.
So the site would be the parking lot across the street, is what you're thinking?
It's the
No.
Elm Street lot by the senior center.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Oh, that's.
Yeah. So, this doesn't prevent parking, so you'd still have your parking revenue. From what I know, I think the parking revenue at that lot is something around 60,000 a year. I think we should check
Oh,
that,
okay.
because I think the total annual parking revenue for the entire village is like 90-something thousand per year. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And so this is actually a sizable increase of revenue from a parking lot.
We shouldn't tell them that.
No.
Wonder if they'd sweeten the pot by powering the senior center.
If they can get, this is actually interesting. So they will sell us power and give us a discount as well. So there's like that other option. And then they could also sign up like residents. So they could make this power, which is cheaper than what you're currently paying Con Ed. They could offer that to residents as well, which is sort of an interesting perk. These lease prices are considering them selling power to, effectively at closer to retail rate with a discount. We could probably push them on these numbers, or I would argue that we should go out to the marketplace and, we need to, I think, and run an RFP to see what this lot is worth from a lease perspective. And then I would also argue that we might actually want to own this asset, right? Because this lease payment is after they've made their profit. Yeah, and that's a project that like the LDC could take on, right? There's a number of ways you could do a project like this. Some developers will actually let you buy in with equity and own a portion of the project, and then therefore like make a bigger lease payment or take some of the profits that the project is generating.
Jared, I love this idea. I will point out, I think that the images that show the cars, like a cartoon there, maybe there's different heights, but that's not quite the same as the height in the other picture here with the white and the red car.
Yeah.
It's a lot taller there.
Right, so this is like just indicative. It's just like giving you an idea of what they're talking about.
View and people complaining about their views.
Yeah, that's a serious consideration. So this would have to go through a whole process. Yeah. And a design process. We could dictate, what the canopy looks like, the way it's designed. There's an interesting approach where they use cable tensile structures to carry solar. So it doesn't have these like really big bulky steel structures that carry the panels. They actually use, cables under tension to do it, which is a little bit more efficient from a structural perspective. But yeah, there's concerns that maybe some of the trees would come out, right? There's trees on the parking lot. But it is a parking lot, right? It's not the most attractive thing in the world as it is currently. So, sort of an interesting way to like keep your parking and make more revenue. Yeah.
So I'm not as familiar with this stuff as you are, Jared. What do opponents say about this stuff?
What do opponents say?
Yeah.
The biggest opposition to large-scale solar right now is on greenfield. So you're actually starting to see a lot of solar being developed in horse farm country, Katona, Bedford, you know, cutting trees down like forest to build solar. I mean, people are losing their minds over those kinds of projects. And I agree, it's not the most environmentally friendly way of pursuing solar. And so a lot of those people that oppose that large-scale solar, you know, they come to the table and say, look at all the parking lots that we have and look at all the roof space that we have. Why aren't we doing that first? So it is a much more land-efficient way to do solar if you're doing it over parking, because, you know, what else is happening at the parking lot, really? Not much.
What's the lifespan on these structures? Like,
So.
how long are they anticipated to work for? I mean, will they outlive the 25-year?
Yeah, it will. So it'll last, you know, 40 years. There's a degradation rate on it. It's like 2-ish%. So at the end of the 25-year period, you know, the project is done. It's paid itself back. It's, you know, paid its returns to the owners. And I believe that they're saying that they would turn it over to us at that time. And at that time, you could either release and new panels can go on, and you just like refinance the whole thing and start over. By then, panels are probably going to produce, who knows, like 3 times as much as they produce today, given the way things are developing, which is pretty interesting. You know, this is lucrative for a developer. It really is. So I would think that this seems to be an easy project, right? Just in general, we don't know what the neighborhood says. We don't really have an idea yet. But there's other areas, I think, where this could also be pretty attractive in the village. And then particularly at a new DPW building that's going to have a really large roof. Yeah. Yeah.
This is a New York company, it looks like?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And now I'm not suggesting like we go with it. Like,
Yeah, I was going to say, are there
yeah.
other companies that do this?
There's a
That
lot of
we have
companies.
to see other proposals.
Yeah. This one's interesting because they're doing the convent on Route 9 near Ossining.
Oh,
There's a
okay.
convent north of Ossining. And yeah, exactly. So they signed a lease with them on their parking lot. So they're doing this similar project. Yep. But we're starting to see these pop up all over the place, and it's sort of the right time to do it.
This is a project that would get the village some PR, likely good PR.
And I think it helps us on the climate smart community.
Mhm.
Yeah.
They've got a bunch of these at Ramapo College, and they've got some large parking lots there.
Yep.
You know, largely, you know, commuter school, and they've got these big areas, so.
So on the page, actually right after the site lease summary, where it's, you know, we're showing the annual lease payment, it's saying solar for your community. That's the top of the page. This is sort of just showing what kind of discount they can offer to residents. So it's like right off the top, 2-cent discount on your electric rate, and that could be available for anyone. And they're saying, you know, Anchor could be us, like we could get discounted power. We see how competitive it is with like the NIPA power that we get, which I don't know if they could be competitive with that. But then another anchor could be, you know, anybody, honestly. It could be a new condo building that goes up. It could be DeChico's, anyone that has a large power consumption.
Might be interested.
Who?
30 Andrews would be right next door.
Yeah.
They might be interested.
Yeah, and they would be residential customers.
Yeah.
So, yep. So, you know, just an interesting way to monetize some of our existing assets. And that's all I've got on that. If anybody has any more questions on it, let me know.
Would it make sense to have these guys come and do a quick presentation for us, or is that what this was?
You know what I think? Yeah, you know what I think we should do? I think we should run an RFP. Like, if we like this lot, if we like this idea, you know, we should run an RFP, and get a few bids on it. And if these guys remain competitive with the other bids, then okay, cool. We can also sort of assess what it would look like if we were going to own a system. And just off the top of my head, this looks like it's probably like a $3.5 million project, and could have a 5 to 6 year return. So not bad.
Could there be any grants?
You're saying if we were to own
Yeah.
it?
If we were to own it, yeah.
And maybe there's some grants out there too for doing that.
There
as
are,
well.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there's NYSERDA stuff.
Sure.
The other thing that's really interesting too is solar generates an investment tax credit that we can't use because we're a municipality, but we could sell that tax credit off sort of like at a discount to someone that has a tax liability.
Sort of like
So.
the low-income housing tax credit.
It's just like that, yeah.
So there's an established market.
Oh, yeah. It's 26% of the total
Yeah.
cost of the project comes back as a direct tax credit. Yeah.
I kind of like the turnkey aspect of it, of the lease plan, and also it would effectively be a trial run if we were to do this
Yeah.
elsewhere. We'd learn the pitfalls and so on without actually owning everything.
Yeah.
Could go either way.
Yep.
It would be interesting to put out the RFP and really do some discovery through that as well, and then maybe at that point be ready to get a presentation, because we can see the value of monetizing it if we own it, and I agree with you, I like the pilot aspect. But I do know that if you sometimes own these things, maybe, you do a pilot with that too, you can pay it off in a couple of years, and it's an annuity for 15, 20 years on what you're making. Either way, you win, right, dollar-wise.
Seems like it.
And to your point, we do it maybe on a smaller scale of it, but I'm in favor of putting effort behind it, because it sounds like it pulls all the levers of what we're trying to accomplish as a board, and, nothing gained if we don't explore it, so thank you for putting work into it. This looks
Yeah, I mean, it's not
very interesting.
it's not going to make our property taxes go away, but
They'll
But
put
it's,
some money in the kitty.
yeah, I mean, if we compare it to what our parking revenue is,
Sure.
it's pretty substantial. Yeah.
Well, minimally, we need to thoroughly understand this and explore it.
Yeah.
We have an absolute obligation to do that. And like so many things, if we look at it and it makes sense, and we should do it. So I don't see a particular reason how something would come up with that, frankly, at this point would say we shouldn't. But I think it would be interesting and worthwhile, and definitely something that the village should get behind. So let's treat this as, all right, here's a kickoff. Since we don't have any other projects going on in the village right now, this is an opportunity to. Okay.
I mean,
And then
I'm
the other
happy to
thing
help,
is,
like,
if
with an RFP.
Jared, since you put this together, what would be helpful is if you've got from any other resources, like, hey, go look at this one, go look, if you've got a list of places,
Yeah.
because we all get around, and it would be nice, let me go check this one out.
Yeah.
I'm
I-
on my way
I
to
actually-
someplace anyway, and
I
I'll go
think
by.
there's one in Tarrytown, by Stop and Shop.
Oh, like in an office park over there?
Yeah, I actually think there's a canopy there. And it's pretty new, near all those big
I've put in
Tesla-
mine already, there's one
Did
in
you? Yeah, you got
Ramapo
one.
at the school, so
Yeah.
next time you're tooling around in that part of New Jersey.
By the way, I probably would have voted no if it were wind turbines in the Hudson, so
Yeah.
this is much better.
Yes.
Yeah,
Cool.
thanks.
All right.
All right, next discussion item is we had a request from the Hudson Anchor to allow them to convert the pickup space in front of their restaurant into a dining area. So what that would do is take the 2 existing parking spaces that they use now for people coming in to pick up and just switch it over to a protected area for outdoor dining. So, thoughts?
I think it's a great area to use as a test case because it's down at the end of Beekman. There's still plenty of other parking that's down there. We can really get an idea of what it's going to look like and how it's going to be used, and you know whether or not we want to do it in other places in the village.
I was thinking we could call it like the Lower Beekman Initiative or something, because I would actually want to discourage the restaurateurs up here from getting any bright ideas, because otherwise they can go all over the place.
Well, that was one of my concerns as well. I mean, if this was being done, I mean, I'm all for supporting businesses and helping them out through the pandemic, but as of today, technically it's over in New York and mandates have been lifted. What is the point of doing this? I mean, if they had come to us 6 months ago or 9 months ago, we would have been happy to help them out to, you know, provide outdoor seating, especially for a restaurant that doesn't have a lot of seating to begin with. So that's one of my concerns is, what's the point of doing it now? What's the point of doing it now? We're gonna lose parking, 1 or 2 spaces, and then as Tom said, what's the precedent we set for other restaurants? Is T-Boy's gonna wanna do it? Is Santorini gonna wanna do it? I mean, are we prepared to lose these many parking spaces by having people do this? Then what type of, will we be requiring a permit fee for it every year? I mean, that's something that has to be thought about as well. So it's just some of the things I was thinking about it. I'm not trying to discourage it. I think it's great, but there are some cons to it as well.
I think we do need to think about like what the fee would look like. I think that's really important. I was just in Nyack, Greenwich, and even Ossining, and Nyack has at least 15 spaces that are closed and turned into parklets, at least 15, that's a historically parking constrained downtown, and they've been approving it. Same with Greenwich, Connecticut.
And I understand that if it's been done for the pandemic, but we haven't done that for the pandemic, and I don't know if I want to start it now that it's not necessary.
I think the demand for outdoor dining is driving. People love outdoor dining, pandemic or not. I think it's sticking. I think it's going to stick around.
And I think it does add to the street atmosphere, even if we did do it up here. It's a really welcoming sight when you're coming down a street and you have, you know, even when they have the tables outside the restaurant, like next to the building, that's nice.
I would prefer that.
Well, but to also have areas where there are these parklets where you have planters around them with flowers, and it's also, I would assume, seasonal. There's going to be a limited time when it's going to be allowed because, you know, during the winter you're moving snow, so it's probably not a good idea. No, who's going to sit outside anyway? So it would be seasonal, but it does add to the welcomingness of the street and the street atmosphere as well.
I've actually also been seeing it in the city, certainly because they're doing that, but where I wanted to also take the conversation a little bit was from a safety standpoint, because I think we have to have guidelines around, you know, how we do this, and it reminds me of some of the things that we've started from scratch, where we started, you know, kind of a checklist of certain things that are important to us, and I'd like to zero in on any zoning that we might have. Before we go too far, is there anything that we have on the books now on what we can do, how far you can be out on the street, because again, that will help guide, it'll be a kind of part of our guiding principle of how we how we look at this, what we adapt to, because what I hear from Denise, it sounds like it's on the same theme. You know, what precedent are we going to start to send? It's not that, again, I don't want to give it to them, but I think that we have to really look at this pretty methodically and maybe do it like a downtown test or something, and broach it that way. So I think we're all saying the same thing, it's just how do we do it more than anything.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
And if we did do it, the dimensions would have to be definitely looked at. I mean, I drove by there, and the cones that they have set up there for curbside picking, you can't even pick up there for curbside because there's a car parked in front and a car parked behind, and they have cones literally in the street. They're in the street, I have to go around them. So that has to be explored.
Yeah.
And that has been done in other communities. I remember looking at this when we were talking about kind of street revitalization, downtown revitalization for Beekman. Very clear rules on exactly what you're talking about. You know, if you have to have planters that are so high to kind of protect the area, it can only come out so far. You know, I mean, you wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel. It's already on.
And the other thing too, just being mindful that we got a traffic study that we just completed for that area because people have been speeding down that corridor. I think we have to recognize that first, and have some recommendations on what we're doing to calm the traffic coming down there, because it's right there. That's where people are speeding. So I think too, we'd have to look at that, and that would be a good point in consideration, you know, to take a look at where that's at, and, you know, maybe the next time we can get, you know, a recap on where that is at.
And would this be considered a traffic calming measure?
Well, that's what's
I would
interesting.
think so,
It could be a
yeah.
component, right? So,
Wonder about that.
that's why I'm thinking maybe the two should be looked at simultaneously.
Yeah. People tend to slow down when there's, you know,
Yeah, exactly.
narrower streets.
Yeah.
Slow.
And something different. All of a sudden you see like, you know, planters with flowers that are kind of out of the street a bit.
Well, it
Makes you
raises
notice.
one of the questions, whoever said something about, I'm sorry, Sam, you were trying to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, you know, kind of echo what people have already said. The biggest thing for me is the safety. Like, if they are going to have something like this, I think you need to have some kind of barrier that can stop a car.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
That's like number one. And then I agree with what Tom said. I think if we try to do that on this part of the Beekman, it'd be very difficult because it would take too much space, it would take too many parking spots.
Agreed.
So it's you know, the question, I know we have extended the life of the time for outdoor dining, right? We passed that last year. So we do have some policy on that already. The question is, if we did it on a seasonal basis, like, are we gonna continue with the current policy, that kind of thing, so.
Well, if we go out on the
Alternative.
street, we really have to.
One of the things that we have to think about is, somebody said something about how far out you can go on the sidewalk, and to me, I know we can shut things down for a street fair, and we can do all that kind of stuff, that's within our rights to do that. As far as I know, you can't do anything in this street right now.
No.
You can't do anything on the sidewalk, you know, the zoning doesn't allow it. So
That's
the thing that would be interesting here is to look at it and say, if we want to do this even as a temporary measure, you know, we want to try it, it's a pilot, we want to do it. Do we need to, even temporarily, we need to adjust something in the zoning? If so, it means we need to have a public hearing. My guess is that, you know, we probably have to do something with the zoning just because that's the way it seems to always work. So my suggestion would be, let's notice for a public hearing, because then that takes a couple weeks anyway, and we then notice for the public, and we have an opportunity to explore it more, and get it in. And I would prefer to notice as quickly as possible, so that we, you know, we don't put it off until September, and say, oh, this would be great next spring when we try it out.
And I think it would be such a great opportunity to get feedback from the community. Like, what do the residents think about it?
Yeah, but I think we need to look at the zoning. Mr. McCarthy, do you have any sense of the zoning offhand?
Is it
Or
zoning?
Other than,
thoughts?
yes, you can't do anything
Is,
in the
is it
street.
What are your
zoning?
thoughts?
Yeah, actually, it won't fall in the zone.
It's not zoning,
It's
yeah.
in the village right away, so it's your purview.
Oh.
There you go.
Okay.
Where,
you don't need a
One.
public
Sean,
hearing.
Sean, quick question. Where does the current sidewalk dining requirements, where do those reside? Those
It's
are
under
like,
the Sidewalk section. of-
yeah. So this would,
Streets and sidewalks.
okay, so this could be,
It's
if
not
we,
actually on zoning.
yeah,
However, it does affect zoning when it comes to the number of occupants in a building. Because now you're extending the seating capacity, and that may affect other building code issues. Like
interesting.
the number of bathrooms that you have, health department requirements.
And if we recognize it as an extension of the restaurant and not a public seating area,
It is, would be,
it would be an extension of the restaurant.
if
Well-
the restaurant serving those occupants.
And nobody else can use the tables.
Right.
So it's definitely an extension of the restaurant. So we
Right.
might end up with something that's saying, okay, your capacity is 100, and that'll put 15 outside.
Yeah.
Then you got to reduce 15 on the inside in order to use the outside.
And I think that when you're talking.
Think about it, if, you know,
That was done down at the river already, respect,
at,
At Hudson Farmer and Fish.
farmer and fish,
Mm.
that's the way it works down there.
The
yeah,
reduced interior, yeah. Interesting.
And I think, you know, when you were talking about, Denise, having more parklets up here, and what does that mean? One idea is instead of having each restaurant have their own little seating area, we have like 2 or 3 common seating areas. And then you're controlling how many, and we get to say, this is how many seasonal seating areas we can have on Beekman, because we've decided that, you know, the parking load can handle it, and it benefits, you know, a greater number of restaurants, and anybody can sit there. Or it can just be, you're not sitting there to eat, you're just sitting there to hang out, you
Well,
know?
I think that's a completely different topic then. That would be more like a parklet, like
Yeah.
up
Public.
at top. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's a
but
different topic.
it could also be a place to eat, like the
The
Cortland,
Cortland.
Beekman,
Mhm.
you know, that can be a place to, like we said,
Right.
take your tacos over there and sit down and eat,
Yeah.
so.
So,
Um,
so what does the applicant need to do, or what do we need to do, maybe to try this as a test? And I think actually, to Sam's point, I think these photos are showing, that's how they would wrap a concrete block, which is like, these went up after 9/11 all over the place to protect.
I'd also want to see a plan for how they remove this when the season's over, and where are they gonna put these big block things?
and we would need a review of the requirements for the restaurant. So what's their capacity right now? How many seats are they going to have outside? And then, because then we would have to look at this and say, what would, if we want, let me just run with it both ways. So my example of 100 seats, and you can't exceed that, then they would have to reduce the seats inside somehow. And it's like that a trade-off that they would want to make, maybe in the summer months. If, on the other hand, we said, oh, you don't have to reduce it. We can just add these. What would we have to do in order to do that? Would we have to, would it trigger a variance in front of the zone, from the zoning board? Because now you're adding to the capacity of the restaurant. Let's make sure all the technical stuff, that we have those answers, and that we provide those to the applicant, and say, okay, you want to do this, you got to reduce inside. If not, if you just want to add, then we have to go before the zoning board. And just a reminder to everybody that the zoning board is like the Supreme Court. I may appoint the members, and you may approve or not approve them, but once they're there, we don't have any control over what they do, okay? Until we change the code itself. So,
Can we look at precedent? I mean, how are other communities?
I could get policies from other villages. I know Dobbs Ferry did it, like Larchmont has done it, other communities have.
So let's pull that stuff together. Let's, as we know, as we learn more about what some of the intricacies are of this, continue obviously discussions with the applicant so they know we're working on it. And although I know, Gary, you're watching this meeting, so thank you. But make sure that we stay up to speed with them and keep them in the loop. Okay?
Yeah, I was struck by Nyack on Saturday, and it was just booming. It's unbelievable. Like, completely bustling, booming place.
Well, that's a nice segue into our next discussion item, because in between that, I just want to let people know that there are going to be fireworks in all over New York State tonight. The governor has pulled, I think, almost all of the COVID restrictions. I think it's into individual stores can say, I still want you to wear a mask, or my employees or whatever, but pretty much all the rest of it is gone. Restaurants are back to, if they can find the workers, which is a big problem right now. If they can find enough staff, they can go back to 100%. Everybody is kind of in that boat. So to celebrate this moment, the governor has arranged for there to be fireworks all over the state. In Buffalo and Albany, and by us, they're going to be in Nyack. So if anybody asks about what's going on in Nyack, why are they shooting out fireworks, now you know.
Tonight?
Yeah, tonight.
Okay. Tonight, sometime, figure after 9 or 9:30. The chief brought this to my attention because he's an avid follower of everything the governor ever says. And he's also aware of the fact that the people might come out, to be on the riverfront or lower Beekman, to have a good spot to be able to see the fireworks. And, as a public safety measure, it's important to know, so he's preparing for that.
So I guess we're okay to do our fireworks on the floor.
I guess so. It's okay now.
Good call.
It's official.
Yeah. All right, so we'll continue
I
to
wasn't
work on the lower Beekman, that's an anchor request. Status report, next up, there's a lot of work has been put in, some by members of this board, on looking at implementing some of the things that were in our comprehensive plan, our updated comprehensive plan. And one of the really big items that we wanted to work on was looking at zoning requirements in various parts of the village and what we should be tweaking or changing or getting rid of. And certainly a really substantial amount of work has been done on what may be a first round, but some really good work. In particular, I want to thank Trustee Spiro for your work on this. And helping to lead that effort, and also Trustee Rodriguez for working on this as well. So I think we're at the point where we're ready to say, okay, these are the changes that we should be going with, which would mean we need to schedule a public hearing and so on. But because give us an update on where we are with that.
I mean, so Sandra and I met, we walked through the document in detail, which incorporated, a number of comments from the board, other discussions that we've been having. That draft went to Ken. And we're hoping to get just some additional comments, hopefully from Sean and the building department. And then we can move to public hearing and adoption.
And if I may add too, I really do want to make a special mention to all the people that contributed on the project. That includes the steering committee, which had representation from all of our departments. We had the consultant, for sure. Our meetings went for about 2.5 hours. So it was very robust. I want to thank Sean McCarthy, who's sitting back. He was, even during his kids' games, he muted himself and participated as well. And it really was a collaboration from all the departments, because zoning is so interesting as to all the different facets of how it interfaces with what we're trying to accomplish, what the planning board sees. And the steering committee also has ambassadors and stakeholders in the community. That was also critically important as well. And I will say, it was really refreshing to have Trustee Rodriguez on there, because he brings an expertise that from just a different perspective than what he does during his day job. So, so I learned a lot, and that's why we went through the painstaking line item, because that was an education for me. So thank you again, and I think it's just really important. It was a good committee that was infused in a very short amount of time, and I think we're going to see a lot of fruits of our.
And it does feel like a really good first step, right? Especially with the lower Beekman overlay, because it's potentially a model for additional overlays and design guidelines for the rest of the community. And there's follow-on conversations that we'll be having about that, I think. So it's it's not over.
No, and I think the public hearing, we could take you through some of the things, but I think that's spot on. Downtown really was a lot of our attention. I mean, that's obviously what the scope of the work was. It does creep a little bit, because then you start wanting to go into the other areas, and you really got to stay very focused. But I think went through the public hearing, when you start asking the questions, we'll have a lot of aha moments through it, to look at the zoning and look at what the comp plan said and look at what we're accomplishing. It's really cool to visualize it when all of a sudden you see that come together. I mean, people say, why zoning? Well, when you read it and you see the application, it's going to change the fabric, so it's really cool.
So a reasonable expectation is that we'd have a resolution at our next meeting on the 29th for the public hearing?
That'd be great. Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Great.
Thank you for your hard work on it, guys.
Okay, we have one more discussion item, and that's about membership on the LBC board, which was something that was brought up by Trustee Gonzalez.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so basically, we've got this billion-dollar project down the street here, which all of us know as the Edge on Hudson and the Commons, which the LDC is spearheading on our behalf, on the village's behalf. It's an enormous project. It's one of the biggest projects in Westchester, and probably one of the top 3 along New York's Hudson River. And our board is ultimately responsible for the development of the Commons and the public land next to the Edge on Hudson development. And I know I take this very seriously, as I know all of you do. A little over a month ago, I sent you guys an email requesting a meeting really just to talk about this, so I'm glad we're finally doing it. And, a couple of things that I had mentioned was, the need to review the proposed current budget of the LDC. I was concerned about some of the budget requests. And many of the village residents have asked me, at various stages about the development of what's going on, what stage are we in, are we done with stage 1, et cetera. And, I've been able to answer some questions, but not all of them. It's been 6 months since we had our last LDC meeting. Today we were supposed to discuss the LDC budget and other project plans, but it had to be postponed because of a conflict in schedules. Conflict in schedules occur all the time. They're normal. Not getting a formal report from the LDC on a project of this size and importance for me is not normal. in this recent email that I sent, I also suggested that we appoint a couple of trustees to the LDC board. And the goal is to, number one, help improve communication with the village board and the LDC board, provide closer guidance to the LDC, and finally to inform decision-making on the LDC board as they move forward, as I mentioned, this huge project. Trustees serving on the LDC board would also support the LDC and the mayor in connecting the dots to the many initiatives we're working on in the commons and throughout the village, right? And we've already talked today about 6 different things that we're doing, and they don't even relate to some of the big things that we have to do down in the commons when we finally get that up and going. You know, the proposed DPW facility at the commons is just one example, right? The LDC bylaws don't prevent us from serving on that board based on feedback that I received from our counsel, Clinton Smith. He noted that we could pass a resolution to amend the bylaws to enable us to serve on the LDC if we agreed to take that action. This proposal, I think, is a responsible course of action for us to consider, and I wanted to open it up for discussion.
So we're currently not permitted to serve on the LDC board? We'd have to pass a resolution to allow that? Is that what you said?
No, the bylaws currently, there's nothing in there that prevents us. It's a matter of the members, which we are the members, just making a resolution to nominate people to sit on that board.
There's one member of the LDC, and that's the village. And for legal purposes, we are the village, this board.
Okay.
So the 7 of us are that one member.
Oh, that's how it's set up currently?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So we do have membership on the LDC board?
No, the village, the village controls the LDC. And so the member can recommend or can appoint people to the LDC board.
Okay.
So as a practical matter, what that means is appointments and approvals by this board to the LDC board.
Okay.
So,
Well, Sam, we spoke, and I share your interest in learning more, about what is the LDC up to, how's the progress. But as I thought about it, I have to admit, and I sent this a note, right? I went and I read the minutes from April. They were, a couple pages, didn't take too long. I'm looking forward to reading the minutes from more recent meetings. And I do feel like the trustees and Ken, that we can ask Dan Breyer to perhaps come and update us more frequently than he has been. But I personally, I don't believe it's necessary to add anybody else to the LDC at this point. I think we can educate ourselves, basically.
Yeah, and thank you for taking it from the beginning, because I think it's always important for us to understand the magnitude of the project and all the layers. I zeroed in on what your goal and objectives were, and there were 2 that seemed to be significant. They were, closer guidance and support in connecting the dots. And when you look at that, because so many of us serve on different committees, I lean towards increasing the amount of times that they present to us, because what I'm concerned about, and I know it's no fault to any of us when we're on a committee, we sometimes get lost and not always updating things as best we can. And so you're asking then a liaison to then update the board as to their viewpoint, and rightfully so, doing the best that they can. So perhaps I think the better, if you flip the deck, kind of I think what Tom is saying, have them present to us, because then we can all weigh in based on the projects that we're touching. And I think that might be a way to better serve what you're trying to accomplish. The other thing, and I know we've talked about this, and I'm a big advocate of this because Dan Breyer just started 6 or 7 months ago. He's getting his arms around this really big project and figuring out who the players are. And not to say that he owns it necessarily, but he's the full-time person, okay? And I want to give him the opportunity to rise to the occasion, to set the expectations of what we're looking for, and to really facilitate that with the other board members and put that out there and making them accountable. Which again, I think we all want the same thing. We want increased communication because we feel it, we touch it, it's getting more real to all of us. We see the buildings going up. We know that we've just finished the pipeline, lining, which was critically important. We didn't expect any of that. So certainly, I err with you on the significance and importance of the project. But that's where I'm sitting right now. I'm so with you on, let's raise the communication, but let's take an interim step to that and divide and conquer our resources in some of the projects that they need us to work on. And that's where I kind of sit right now. I'd like to see them come in more often for sure. And then also pay attention to the minutes and the videos, and I would make that as a commitment that I'll do as myself as a trustee.
Well, I would agree with you, and I would just add maybe when the LDC minutes are distributed to the LDC board, they could be distributed to us as well.
That's a good idea. Top of
But
mind,
other than
right?
that, and increased communications, I feel the same. I don't necessarily think it's a need to add more members. I think we kind of all have our hands in the pot, and kind of difficult to grow another hand.
Are quarterly presentations too much?
Well, if I could answer that in part, by first of all saying, if we had interesting idea to have the LDC report like department heads report. Okay, tonight we get Mr. McCarthy and Mr. Breyer. Okay, here's kind of the update. And for the last several months, the update from the LDC would have been, we're still bringing in Phil. So, okay, in the next month, we're still bringing in, well, now we have 150,000 yards and we need another 10,000 or whatever. I mean, we've been in this kind of very long phase of prepping the site. So nothing very exciting is happening unless you go down there and look at it, and it's pretty incredible to see the physical change there. But it's kind of been the same. We're about to engage in another period where the stuff that's going on is not going to be actually happening on the site, because it's going to be engaging an architecture firm to say, okay, help us design, the DPW facility that we need for our next 50 years. They're not going to be building anything for several months because we can't. The site's not ready yet. We have to wait till the setting is done. So we're in this kind of cool, interesting phase there that I'm sure Mr. Breyer will talk about on our meeting on the 29th. But I want to just reiterate a couple of things that are really important for everybody. And it's that the LDC is doing all of this stuff for us. We decided through a long process, a very public process, of what we wanted, we being the village, we being the board of trustees, what we wanted to see on the east parcel, now called the common. We want to see this and this and this. And then we said to the LDC, you build it for us. We're going to tell you what we want, you build it for us. And we have done that through every step. We've gone through and said, okay, we want to build this up. Well, the ground has to be prepared first. Let's get that done. Now we're at the next step. But everything that's been happening there has been decided. The big stuff has been decided by us. The detail of it is something I don't think we should get involved in from this board, because it would be like us taking over from the planning department some of their major projects. I mean, there's a lot of detail involved. And as you point out, there's a full-time person there doing that. The other thing I just want to remind everybody of is the LDC board meetings are public meetings. Anybody can go to those meetings. So we've had trustees over the years that have gone to those meetings. You have several times. And
Yeah, it was
other
actually-
former trustees have gone to several meetings. The meetings are we have one dedicated person who comes to every LDC meeting. I think she works for HHV, but she comes to every meeting. So, though, you know, there's an opportunity to, for anybody to go. And I think for members of this board who want to know more about what's going on, what I've said to you individually, and I'll say it again here quite publicly, and that is that you can come to any meeting just like anybody else. You're going to be treated differently in that meeting than everybody else. The other people are, they're not open meetings like when we have comments from the public. But as a member of this board, you're going to be treated, you're not going to get the vote on stuff, but you're going to be treated as like, oh, I have a comment, I have a question. You're going to have a voice in those meetings. So it is, the opportunity is there, and you just have to take it and follow through on that. I would, I'm not in favor of adding more people to the board, quite frankly. We've talked about that, and I would not support that. I'm not supporting that, and I look forward to having more frequent meetings as we move forward.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry,
No, go ahead.
I was waiting for everybody else. So I think it would be good to have the LDC come present more often, even if it's to come and say they moved 3 truckloads of dirt onto the site. It's okay, just so I know, yes, something's happening, something's not happening. You know, what's going to happen in the next 3 months. You know, I kind of feel like I really don't know what's going on. And, you know, part of that is on me. I don't read the minutes. And I don't know if their meetings are videotaped. But I haven't watched their meetings. So, you know, part of that's on me. But it would be nice if they came at least as often as we ask Anthony to present, or, you know, the other departments. We did form the LDC for a reason, so that it could do the work of the village without, and there are benefits to that. We're not doing it, they're doing it. But as a trustee, if I'm interested in something, then I want to be able to go to whatever that meeting is. And I think you absolutely have the right to do that. And I think you should, because then you can still be, you know, informed about what's going on, still act as a liaison without formally being on their board, and, you know, still tell us if there's something that you hear that you think, hey, you know, we didn't, the next presentation isn't for 3 months, but maybe you guys want to know this now.
Yeah.
So, you know, information is power. Transparency is always preferred. And I still think it would be great. You're interested in this, you should go. And if there's anything that you see that we need to know about, you should let us know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that idea is great in terms of being a liaison, and I spoke to Sandra about this as well. But I just do want to come back to some of the things that you said, and that is that it's not just moving dirt around that site, okay? The budget has gone up this year, the request for over $250,000 more than we did last year, right? That's a significant amount of money. So now that budget is at, you know, a little over $750,000. And even though, you know, we're just moving dirt around right now, I agree with that, we are in a lot of different stages of a lot of different activities that are going on that site. When we talked about this originally years ago, we talked about, I think it's like 5 or 6 different stages of development, right? And we're close to finishing the first stage. We're doing stuff in the second stage. We have all this architectural stuff and engineering stuff that has to be done. And those are a lot of decisions. Those are a lot of meetings. That's a lot of interaction between the village, the LDC, the engineers, the architects. So yeah, I think it's a big deal. And I think it's important for us to really, for the LDC to take the responsibility to report to us. One of my biggest reasons for proposing this is because I do think that there's been a lack of communication. Agreed. I always have the option of going to a meeting, but I do have an expectation that they're going to report to us as well. And I would strongly urge that we have, we basically say, yeah, we want a report from the LDC, just like we get a report from the department heads. And in fact, when I interviewed Dan Breyer, who I am very impressed with, I think he's a great guy, he's very smart, and definitely very informative when you do get a chance to speak to him. But one of the things I told him was, look, one of the expectations when you take this job is that you need to report to the village board about what's going on. And in those meetings, the public has an opportunity to also hear what's happening at every stage of the process. So that's my thing. You know, if there's not a big groundswell of support, to have people on the board officially, fine. I'd be happy to take on the role of a liaison to the LDC, and I will make a commitment to go to more meetings and then report back to you. But I still have an expectation, not only from Dan, because he's the executive director, but I also have an expectation of that board to follow through and be more consistent about reporting to us, because that has not happened in the 6 years that I've been on this board.
Hasn't happened consistently.
Consistent.
I think, because
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
if we
what I'm
go
talking
back, I will even call out some things that
Yeah,
David
absolutely.
Trudell has done some very good work as then somebody else took over.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
I'm in agreement with you.
And I think,
100%.
maybe I come from a different place too, is that if something doesn't meet my expectation, then I look within myself to say, what can I do to be more clear with what I'm asking? So I think at this point, we are all in agreement that we want better communication, so let us be that person. The other thing is too, and I say this because there are a lot of subcommittees that are on that project, and all those subcommittees have taken the responsibility to speak to it, which is what the LDC touches. So for example, the big DPW project that's going on, I know personally I had taken the entire board through a very detailed explanation of what's going on. The LDC was very critically involved in that because it's work that they're doing, but because I took a liaison position on a subcommittee, just like somebody else, Denise is working on the other, on the other side of the fence so all of that stuff is coming and it's degrees. So it's coming from different parts, but I think that where they can take it is to present and say, look at the update here, here, and here, and here, and do hotspots and give that bird's eye view, which is maybe what you're not seeing. But I have confidence, I guess, and that's where I think it's really important to speak to, because I know you're speaking over 6 years. I have the confidence in the subcommittees that they're doing the parts that are necessary to keep things together. I really do recognize the fact that we had to get that ground in order to even erect anything in there, which I think was critically important. And I do stand aground to say, looking forward, that Dan came on 6 months ago. That is a complete volunteer board that, just like anything else, it sometimes is hard to keep up with that. So I want to take a position of saying to Dan, as it's becoming real to us, we want to ask that this is important. These are now good ground rules that we want to have moving forward, because it'll make us feel a lot more comfortable. And I could bet you in an instant we're going to see a change direction with more presentations. And if not, I see you smirking over that. And if not, then we continue to ask for it, and you look within yourself to see how you can change it. That's my goal.
Two questions just to follow on to that. First is, do we have the power to compel subcommittees? How did the subcommittees get formed?
Are you talking about the DPW?
Yeah, I'm really interested in UAW. How come that
DPW.
hasn't moved? Right, there was an RFEI for it, nothing happened.
You need a subcommittee within the LDC?
Yeah,
I don't know.
what
No,
happened to do?
Because then we become the LDC.
Sure. But like,
Maybe
like
I'm
the
using
I mean, as a
DPW.
practical matter, I mean, that kind of thing doesn't work.
You mean our
Legally, do
committees
we,
here.
can we,
I'm
like,
talking about our committees.
Just talk about our committees.
Our
that-
committee.
that-
Like
That
the
over.
DPW.
Not
here's how it's worked.
Yeah,
Yeah.
As a practical matter.
So-
It's like, you have an interest in the solar stuff, guess what?
yeah. No, I know.
Okay?
Yeah.
You're the lead.
Yeah.
You're already the lead. You made yourself the lead because
Right.
you went and you did the research and you got this stuff and you brought it to us. Like, guys, I think this is a really important idea. I think it's critical that the village follow through on it. Well, there is no committee. There could be somebody else who wants to work with you on this, in
Yeah.
which case it sort of becomes that. Sandra is doing that with the DPW study because she had an interest in it. She wanted to do it.
Okay.
Denise has been interested in recreation pieces and in parks and has taken a really big role in doing that.
Right.
And going to those meetings and participating and reporting back to us on that. We had, years ago, when I was first on the board, we had these standing committees that was like, okay, you're the police department, you're DPW,
Yeah.
you're the building department. And we had a trustee that took it to an extreme about, certainly in the building department case, and would sit down and grill Mr. McCarthy about housing court stuff that was coming up. And what are we doing about this one? It's like, we don't need that kind of detail on this board. Are we following through on it? Yes. Are we getting, yeah. And so I was mayor and I said, this doesn't work. This is making no sense whatsoever. Let's have a committee where we need it because we're working on something right now. And we'll appoint them formally where we think we need to do it. And then people will work on it. And then when that project is done, the committee goes away. So then people aren't then sitting there torturing Mr. McCarthy about, how come this person, this bad landlord is still a bad landlord. It just, sorry to bring back those memories for you, but
Can I just say,
but it just, so we have worked in, there have been ad hoc ones, but we assign ourselves in a sense. So Sam is saying, I've got a really big interest in what's going on with the LDC. I don't think I know enough about what's happening there. I don't think the rest of us know enough about it. And so I think, Sam, okay, you go to the LDC meetings and start reporting back to everybody else. This is what's happening.
Yeah.
And you get more into it, you realize which part of it's are the detail that we don't need to know, and which parts are the bigger conceptual parts. And I think that works pretty well.
Yeah.
I mean, because then nobody feels like, well, what's my committee?
Sure.
When I was first on this board, I was a minority member in that I was not part of the ruling group, and I got assigned to a committee as a formal assignment, the Intergovernmental Relations Committee. Yes, for real. And what I did once a year was talk to somebody on the Terrytown board. So you guys want to do anything with us? No. I was like, okay, all right. We'll go back and do our respective reports. Because I was sidelined, and it's like, well, we want to put you someplace where you can't do any damage, or you can't. It didn't work because we got more people on the board anyway, but it was like that, to me, I think back on that about the permanent assignments. We're not Congress, so we don't have all that, but we have stuff that comes up all the time.
It's more productive when the trustee is interested and has a vested interest in the project they're working on at the time that it's happening.
Right.
But just to put the question to bed, right? The DPW committee was born out of the Board of Trustees, and there's overlap with the LDC, correct?
No.
So what's the
The overlap.
No overlap?
The overlap is this. We have a DPW study underway that'll hopefully give us some guidelines and recommendations about how we can modernize certain things, and also point out what it is that we need for the next 10 years or 15 years in the way of workers and job skills and equipment and so on. So that came out of this board.
Right.
That could have happened regardless of whether or not we were building a new facility.
Sure.
Okay? So, and it is a tool that'll be helpful to Chris Gross when he comes to on in the beginning of August. The LDC plays into this because we told them we want you to build us a new facility. And there's like, okay. And their question to us is, well, what do you want in that? Because we don't need a DPW. We're the LDC. It doesn't mean anything to us. So we're hiring an architectural firm that will help us design it with the help of this study, with the help of Chris Gross, to say, okay, here's the things that we need in it. And when we get that design done, that will go to the LDC and say, okay, bid this out for us.
Okay, that makes sense.
So they don't have anything to do with deciding what's actually going to be in the DPW facility. They're the implementers. They're the ones who are saying, okay, now we're ready to go. Here's what we want, go make,
Yep.
make more sense.
Get it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So just want to mention a couple of things. You make a great point, like you're asking, well, how does this connect to that? And this is one of the reasons why I think it's important for us to have more frequent reports.
Yeah.
So everybody has a better understanding of how all these things connect to each other when we're making decisions. And I also want to say that the board members on the LDC, I think they're fantastic. They put in a lot of time, a lot of effort, and each of them has really great expertise. But there's only 3 board members and the mayor that sit on the LDC. So, I think it's good to have several minds. These 3 minds are great. With the mayor, 4 minds, it's great. It doesn't hurt to have a couple more, people inputting and bringing experience and perspective and helping us all just be on the same page with where we're going. Because as I said at the beginning, this is a huge project, right? And once it gets built, that's it. We have to live with it. I want to make sure that we do it right. After talking with Dan, I talked with Dan recently. And he's going to present to us, hopefully, within the next few weeks.
29th.
And Mayor, what I would ask is that you help us with the communication. And, we'll go from there. And I'm happy to be a liaison.
Okay, great.
Anthony, could we get the LDC minutes distributed to us when they're distributed to their board? I think
We
that'll
want
help as
them
well.
after they're approved. Same thing happens the LDC that is with us.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, when
Yeah.
they're approved.
Teresa always finds something wrong with
Okay.
And
it.
then,
The only reason I raise it, so.
and then, moving to sort of like a department head type presentation, whether it's quarterly or semi-annual, I feel like that makes a lot of sense. And then Sam, if you can't go to a meeting, I would go. We could do like a report out or even an email update. I think that's enough for now, at least. Because I don't know what I don't know, I have no
Well, I'll
idea.
tell you what you don't know. Let me just say there's no prohibition on who can go to a meeting. Like I said, they're public meetings. So I think you used to come pretty much by yourself. And, but the people who aren't on the board, we used to come, a couple of people used to come together. Specifically John Levy and Glenn Rosenblum would come. We would always sit over there. The LDC would sit around this table here. And join in when things came up. So,
Cool.
I'll make sure everybody knows what the schedule is, and when we will all have the opportunity, or at least everybody who's going to be here on the 29th will have the opportunity to say directly to Mr. Dowling and Mr. Breyer, hey, we want more frequent formal reports. Okay?
Thank you.
All right. That completes our work session agenda. Just a reminder that we will not be having a meeting next week on the 22nd. This is a month with 5 Tuesdays in it. We only meet on 4 Tuesdays every month. So our next meeting will be a regular board meeting, and it will be on Tuesday, June 29th. Look forward to seeing everybody then. Thank you and good night.
Good night.